Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children of all ages, Driveline Baseball and Driveline Academy are proud to present to you the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I am your marble-mouth host, Deven Morgan, Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and we've got some spicy stuff to talk to you guys about today because it's June and spicy things happen in youth baseball in these months when we're playing the craziest amount of games and we see the craziest behavior from those of us that participate. But before we get into that stuff, first-time listeners, last-time listeners, who the smart ones of you are subscribed and have rated this show on whatever platform host du jour that you use, which is much appreciated. If you haven't, get in when you're fit in. It's a good idea. Anyways, first we're going to start off with axbat.com, code DL20. Get you 20% off with our good friends at Axe on your stick and ball sport enthusiast things like game bats, things like training bats. They have all of those things at Axe. You can get them for cheaper. Use code DL20, get you 20% off. Beyond that, the thing that we need to give you is some information about our Driveline Academy camps. And I'm just going to be the paid shill that you know and love. Hopefully it's love. I mean, I don't know why you listen to this show as like a hate listen. And thank you for doing that. We got some pretty great feedback from somebody that attempted a camp here in Washington. I'm just going to read it to you verbatim. You can make your own decision about if this is a thing that you want to tell other people about or have your players come down and check it out. Hi, Deven. I wanted to take a moment to personally thank you and your team. My 6-year-old recently attended a session at Driveline, and although both of us were a little nervous at first, I wasn't sure how you'd respond or if you might be too young for the experience. It turned out to be one of the best days we've had together. By the end of the camp, he was following his coach around with confidence and excitement, completely comfortable on his own. Watching him step out of his comfort zone and thrive in that environment was truly a blessing. When we left, he was drenched in sweat and said, "Dad, I can't wait to go back here." Dan and Carson, Dan Comstock, Carson, one of our interns who's helping us run camps, did an incredible job. They created an environment that was welcoming, encouraging, and challenging in all the right ways. My son looked up to them instantly, and their ability to connect with kids while still maintaining the integrity of Driveline's approach was awesome to witness. Sometimes this job can be challenging because you're trying to do right by everybody. And getting feedback like this from the parent of a kid who, like, by rule... by rule is too young to do this thing. We try to tell people that, like, hey, look, around 8 or 9 is probably the earliest we want to be. But sometimes you just run into kids who are maybe ready for something like this. And it's certainly something we can try out. And, like, man, there ain't much better than getting this type of feedback, because the thing that it calls to mind is the impression that I had when I took my son to Driveline in 2018. And the email that I sent, or I guess I actually posted something on Twitter at that time, and I suppose I could dig it up. And Mike Rathwell, Lord Business here at Driveline, actually sent me an email in relationship to the Twitter post that I made back in 2018 about the feedback from, like, the day one experience that I had as a parent who didn't work here, first bringing my son down for that first off-season training group. And what I said at the time to Mike was, okay, let me back it up. What Mike said to me: just wanted to say that I saw your tweet about our youth group and really appreciated it. We really try to give the most S's, because I think I said something, on Twitter about how patently obvious it is when people really care. And I, people give the most S's. You understand what I'm saying, right? So Mike goes, we really try to give the most. So to see it called out on day one was pretty awesome. I shared it with the staff. Thanks again. And what I said to Mike, I've been following Driveline stuff for years. So when I saw that you guys were doing a youth camp, it was an absolute no-brainer. My son is at the beginning of his journey in baseball, but already we've had a variety of experiences, having him go to different camps in the last couple years. Some good, some less than ideal, and some that were borderline dangerous. I'll save that story for another time. It's a good one. With that background, the fact that you're offering this level of training and this level of care, the given essitude, right? It just absolutely blew me away and made the drive down from Shoreline 100% worth it. Man, I'm just trying to keep that energy going. Like that's just it. We are trying to provide for you the thing that compelled me to join the pirate ship something like 8 years ago and try to provide these type of transformative experiences for kids who get exposed to the way that we do it, which is so fundamentally different than kind of anything that you're going to find out there. And I'm not saying that to disparage anybody, right? Like that's not the point. But the point is that we do have some tools and some approaches and the way that we try to use data and use technology to engage people with this game, and specifically kids, in a way that like you just typically don't find in other places. And that's basically the same concept. That's the customer experience we're trying to deliver to you guys with the camps, is the same one that I got 8 years ago, and just keep that energy rolling. So to that end, if you're in Washington or you're in Scottsdale, Arizona, or you're in Tampa, Florida, we got camps rolling in all 3 locations. They're being run by our excellent staff to provide these type of experiences. And you, because you listen to this podcast, and I appreciate the heck out of you for doing that, can get 30% off if you use code, basically the state designation, CAMP30 will get you that 30%. So WA CAMP30, 30% off Washington camps. AZ CAMP30, 30% off of Arizona camps. FL CAMP30, shocker, 30% off of Florida camps. So use those codes, spread them out, send them to your whole team of Little League kids. We just got a whole bunch of staff in here that are really fired up about getting kids started in this thing in a different fashion and starting them on that pathway in so much as it matters at a younger age to understand the thing that we think that they need to understand about their capacity to grow and develop skill in a meaningful but measurable fashion. That's the thing that we can start to communicate with camps. We can expand that into other training stuff that you've probably heard me talk ad nauseum about. But like the camp is a great entry place or entry point into kind of the stuff that we can offer. So if you're into that, you use those codes, WA Camp 30, AZ Camp 30, FL Camp 30 will get you 30% off when you book. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Signups have been great. This feedback has been great. We've got more on the way, so we're going to keep rolling on it. So thank you guys that have come down already. And if you haven't come down, haven't come down yet, man, make your next move your best move. Come holler at a player and use those codes to get 30% off. So we got some stuff for you guys today. I wanted to dig into a topic that I think is germane to this whole discussion about letting kids know how they get better in the game, kind of influenced by some of the stuff we talked about in the Skills at Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual, which is this difference between kind of approaching youth baseball from a skills at scale perspective as opposed to what we would call, or I suppose what I would call, a game theory optimal, right? So I think there's a couple different ways we can unpack this, right? And first thing like that we probably need to define is, what do we mean by game theory optimal, right? Like what does that mean? Game theory optimal, what we're talking about that is we are talking about how you basically optimize for the preferred game outcome, right? You have a theory on a mechanism by which you win these games and you pursue that thing. And you can execute game theory in any game or aspect of life if you kind of start to think about life as like a winning and losing thing, which perhaps you might want to be a little less transactional and a little more transformational, but I digress. Anyways, game theory is kind of a thing, right? And I think we understand what game theory looks like in youth baseball, but let's get a little bit of some reps about how we define that, right? So we're talking about a game theory optimal approach to youth baseball. We're talking about one that revolves around capitalizing on the resource that we value most, which is winning. Parents and coaches tend to sometimes fixate on whether we are acquiring enough of those resources or not, and the answer to that question kind of tends to define the experience, right? The tricky part about once you start to go down that path about game theory optimal in youth baseball is that, first of all, when you identify that the win is the resource you are trying to acquire most pressingly, then there's a bunch of other decisions about your schedule that kind of get made for you in a way that probably isn't doing you any favors, and to be honest, is at certain occasions setting kids up for the opportunity to be overused. And we'll dig into that minutia, but let me just kind of stay on the top level for now, right? If the thing that you want to acquire the most for your child's youth baseball experience, and again, I think it's important to talk about the fact that, like, this isn't the children that are driving this, right? We are talking about what the adults are driving. And, you know, to be honest, I don't say that to say, as I move my laptop over here so you get less of a glare on my stupid face, I'm not saying that to suggest that children are immune to the desire to win a game. That is a ridiculous thing to say that I would not say, because I have had 18 years of raising children. Not a lot, not a ton of time compared to other people, but not a little time. And I'm acutely aware of children's very binary relationship with outcome, wherein they want to win because the winning is the thing that makes them feel good, and they don't like to lose because losing makes them feel bad. And again, longtime listeners have heard this concept beaten down to the point that I kind of want to apologize, but our audience numbers continue to grow. So some of you, like triple OGs with the Academy podcast, you're just going to have to bear with us while we bring our new friends along with this type of understanding and systemic approach and kind of perspective on the game. And I think to a degree, if you understand that, like, kids are going to have that binary relationship with an outcome where there's one that makes them feel really, really good, but then it kind of evaporates over time, like, because none of these kids are going to hold on to these memories for a very long time. They're going to be replaced with more substantial memories, right? But it makes sense in the current term that if you understand as a parent, and as a parent who coaches, and again, this is youth baseball, so oftentimes our coaches are parents, if you understand how pressing your players' need is to win, and you understand that as the coach of a team or the leader of an org, that commonly the way that parents will evaluate your organization is how often you win, you've kind of got like an interpersonal rationalization, and you've got an organizational or a more broad rationalization of why you would choose this kind of game theory optimal approach, right? Like, everybody wants the thing to revolve around winning, so therefore it does. Now, when we start to talk about skills of scale, we're going to talk about the idea that, like, I think not enough people understand that there's a different way to do it, but again, I'm going to take that thread and I'm going to shove it over there, and we're going to talk about that in the beginning, right? So game theory optimal, right? What does that look like on a field? Well, I think there's a lot of coaching strategies, and in so much as it matters, like, I don't know, strategies from parents that are either instructed to a child on a field or shouted to that child where they're in competition, that all largely revolve around optimizing for the game theory optimal. When we're talking about the just throw strikes, look, we've had that conversation about how that's just like a massive simplification of what you actually need to do. But consider the impetus behind that, right? The thing that we're, like, basically alluding to in that type of coaching, either by an actual coach or by a parent, which is largely that if you don't throw strikes as if it's a choice, but again, I'm gonna drop that little crumb and I'm gonna sweep it over to the side, right? If you don't throw strikes, your capacity to compete in the game is going to be limited, specifically from a lens of base runners. The more balls you throw, the more free passes you give out, because no one's kind of like come to their senses and gone like, all right, like, do we really want to like have walks be a thing for 9-year-olds? Do we want walks to be a thing for 10-year-olds? Is there a different way that we could construct this game that's more fun? Again, thread, throw it over there. Anyways, because we haven't come around to that realization, the more base runners you put on, and the more that catching, much like pitching at very, very young levels of youth baseball, is a commodity that nobody has enough of, a walk is a triple, right? Because the pitching generally isn't that good, so you can have a fair amount of what you might otherwise call wild pitches at a more advanced level. For 9 to 12-year-olds, it's just like it's pitching, right? Because they're just not very good. They're at the most formative stages of their skill development. They're not very good at said skill. So a walk becomes a triple. Because you don't have enough good catching to keep that ball in front. You don't have enough pitching to avoid wild pitches, and that combination turns a free 60, right, or a free 80, depending on the age, into a triple. Or just full-blown like a runner's going to score, because you have scarcity of those two commodities, competent pitching and competent catching. The other thing that's game theory optimal is just like a contact-first approach. I think one of the more informative comments that I ever heard from somebody else about like their perspective on youth baseball, and then kind of how that perspective informs the way that you approach skill development, was that a fly ball only needs to be caught. A ground ball needs to be caught, thrown, and caught again. That's game theory optimal. That was said to me by a very, very smart person who was looking at the competitive landscape of youth baseball at this early kind of formative stage and going like, okay, well, there's some opportunity here. And he's not wrong. You know, that's the thing about game theory, is like approaching it this way. If you do it the right way, you're actually right. Like if you follow these kind of tenets, you're probably going to win more games. Other things, right? Bunting. I haven't talked about bunting on here for a good long time. We're due for a rant. Look, at the professional level, it makes sense to me that bunting is going to be more of a weapon than it is now. Because to a degree, run scoring is going to, I think, probably going to start becoming like more of a premium thing, which is all relative to the competitiveness and competency of pitchers at the professional level. Because of that, and because it's really hard to get a productive AB when you swing through like two 97-mile-an-hour turbo sinkers and then an 83-mile-an-hour sweeper that starts in the middle and runs a foot and a half off the plate, right? Like it's hard to have a productive at-bat against that type of stuff. So it makes sense to me at the professional level that we are going to see more bunting. And look, and the whole point of professional baseball is just to win. Like, that's the one place where game theory optimal should be deployed most diligently, right? Youth baseball, though, is not that. So when we take away opportunities for hitters to learn in competition how to have a productive at-bat, how to have an approach, how to make swing decisions relative to game circumstance, relative to at-bat circumstance, relative to how the pitcher's performing, any of these type of things, right? A child needs opportunities to learn those things. And if you take away their opportunity to learn, which means you're taking away their freedom to swing, in like 3-0 counts or 3-1 counts, right? Instead of doing like, my brother Jeremy Techteal, we get in a plus count, right? I know what he's going to say. Get your A swing off. Like, what are we talking about? We're not talking about a full-on, like 110%, Kent Murphy put it over the stadium swing, but we are talking about if you're going to swing, you should be swinging at a high level of intent to try to do some damage. And I suppose that like you could make the argument that when we are coaching and instructing the game that way, we are practicing kind of our own game theory optimal, because we are trying to get the most value out of opportunities where pitchers by circumstance are going to try to throw strikes and are more likely to throw the pitches that are easier for them to locate, which, fun fact, are sometimes easier to barrel. What do we like? We're hunting heaters. 3031, man, we're hunting heater. Like that's what that is. Because the pitcher is incentivized not to give somebody a free 90 or a free 60 or a free 54 or whatever it is. Or I'm sorry, a free 80. That's our own type of game theory optimal, but we pursue that type of game theory optimal not to maximize production in the current term. We are doing it to maximize learning in the current term. That makes sense? Bunting is the opposite of that. If you are doing it in a way where you are like harvesting opportunities for that kid to learn how to get off their A swing in a plus count. Same thing with like, I guess it's the same thing exactly in terms of like not only the circumstance of choosing to bunt and to get runners on, but also like full-blown take signs, right? That's a thing. I think you would probably go so far as to say that there's some game theory optimal in the way that sometimes coaches in youth baseball don't give kids an opportunity to call their own game, and we call it for them. Now, I've talked about this before, and I've heard from folks who are like, hey, I call the game, but I break down with my catchers after the game why I called what I did and how it worked. And it kind of sounds like you're like elevating that child to have almost to participate like in an adult with an adult after action report. And if that's how you're doing it, then look, I got nothing to say. But if you're not having that level of conversation and you're not giving a child that level of autonomy to call their own game in terms of a catcher working with a pitcher, then it's hard for me to not conclude that like you're running the game theory optimal there because you have reduced or no tolerance for the variance you might encounter when those children are learning together. That's kind of a critical thing. And again, the thing that's important to understand here is that like this approach to the game is taught because it works, right? The catching in the defense is not good enough, right? The walk turns into the triple, right? A lot of contact at the younger and younger levels sometimes is hard to turn into outs, period. Like it's a lot easier to just like let the hitter get themselves out. Those pitchers who are highly accurate at the youth baseball level, if they're not faced with like a high contact and probably a decently high type of power approach from the people that they're in competition with, otherwise known as the hitters on the other team, again, that pitcher isn't getting a lot of signal that like this approach doesn't work, because it does, right? It's game theory for a reason. And if the environment that we started these kids in youth baseball was evergreen in terms of the physical configuration, the competitive landscape, etc., then I would probably be the first one telling you that like that's the type of stuff that we need to optimize for. But it's not. The problem is the real estate problem, first of all. And again, first-time listeners, you guys haven't heard me go through this before. My triple OGs, my Jerrys and Jacks, you guys have been around for this thing. So to regurgitate quickly, when you go from like a 46-60 field to a 60-90, there's a lot of variance in baseball real estate, period, right? Not all 46-60 fields are the same. Not all 60-90 fields are the same. You can find numerous hilarious threads on social media about weird 90-foot baseball field setups. But the point is that when you go from a 46-60 field to a 60-90, And the square footage increase, right, the real estate problem, is like somewhere between 280 and 335% increase. Well, that increase in play space demands a different set of skills, and specifically, it demands skills that are paired with output. So when you understand that idea, you understand that somewhere in that transition of the cohort between 6 to 12-year-olds and 13 to 17-year-olds that we lose somewhere around 1.6 to 1.8 million kids stop participating in our game. And that's the difference of the size of those cohorts. It's going to be really challenging for me to not look at that real estate problem and start to see some sort of effect between the massive player loss and the massive real estate change. So that's a real thing. Kids end up in 46, 60, or I suppose 50, 70s until about the point of time that they're 12 or 13, right? But by the time that you're 15, you're playing high school baseball. Even if you're playing on select or club ball, you're playing on 60, 90 fields. And if you didn't start accounting for this stuff before you were 12, let's say you finish your entire Little League season being kind of intentionally ignorant of the need for greater skill output that goes with the greater physical dimensions of the game, which says nothing about the need to swing like a drop five or a BB core bat, which is another thing that's in there as well. You would have to increase skill somewhere around like 10, 11% per month if you fundamentally neglect this issue until the time that you're 12 so we're just playing ball, right? We're just playing ball until we're 12, and then we decide, oh, okay, I'm 12 years and 1 day old. I finished my Little League major season. Now I need to start getting ready for the 90-foot field. You have to basically increase your skill by almost like 11% per month to deal with that real estate problem in terms of the competitive output of like average 12s versus what it looks like in terms of like average 15s. It's a big difference. And it's a big difference with different implements, again, in terms of the hitting side, right? Like the swing weight or just the raw weight of a BB core bat versus a drop 10 USA bat if you're just playing Little League, drastically different. It's going to be a problem because once you get dropped on that big field, if you're accuracy first and you're not used to hitters being able to punish you, well, guess what? We just carved 1.6 to 1.8 million of the competitors out of that landscape. The kids that are left probably know how to play ball. The kids that are left are probably more adept at being able to find a barrel on something that you leave in the middle of the zone. The way that you increase competitiveness is decrease decision-making time. One way that you can decrease decision-making time is by throwing the ball harder. But again, if you fundamentally under-index for this stuff for the first 12 years of your child's life, you have a lot of ground to make up in a really short amount of time. We talk in the book about the difference between like player A and player B, right? There's a little mock-up in there about like player A. Think about this kid who is heavily like game theory optimized, meaning if you start to think about their baseball skills, you would think about them as like highly rated in the application of those skills and moderately to low rated. Well, I mean, I guess we could just say below average when it comes to the output of those skills. So what does that mean? We're talking about kids who throw strikes, but they don't throw the ball hard. We're talking about kids who are contact oriented, but can't hit for power. That stuff plays on a 60-foot field. That stuff is borderline irrelevant and non-competitive on a 90-foot field. And that's not a tattoo, right? That's not something you can't deal with. But to address those things takes time. And if you fundamentally under-index for the development of those skills, the pairing of accuracy with output, you're kind of behind the curve with a really limited window to reverse course. On the other hand, think about the other thing, right? Think about a kid who has been taught to try to maximize their output on a field through their youth baseball experience. I'll grant, like the pathway to have a kid learn how to hit for power is probably longer than the pathway for a player to hit for contact. That makes sense, right? We already understand the speed to accuracy trade-off. We also understand that like getting accurate at moving fast is a discrete skill in and of its own. So I would grant that between the ages of, 9 through 14, you could probably train a kid to hit for a really high average in that period of time, just emphasizing contact, right? And if you think about the way that that's going to play out in terms of the individual athlete, it probably means a more contact-oriented approach and a more contact-oriented set of swing mechanics. The problem is that the approach is one thing. The approach is one thing, and I suppose like if there's anything that's really malleable in this equation, it's probably approach more than anything. But the mechanics side of things is like that's a tough cookie to crack, because if you have a kid who for years and years and years they go out to the field with a parent 2 days a week, and they got practice 2 days a week, and they got games like 2 to 3 days a week. If that kid has worked to optimize a set of mechanics for, again, like from this like 9 to 14, I've seen what those swings look like. There isn't a lot of proximal to distal, big segment to small segment, full body sequential movement. They haven't received a lot of runway to learn how to sequence their movements together for accuracy paired with output. We're talking about 55 mile an hour swing speeds instead of 70, 75 mile an hour swing speeds. One of those things is a heck of a lot easier to control. And if your competitive landscape is a bunch of kids who are not that great at defense when you're 12 or 11 or 10 or 9, it makes entirely logical sense that you could really refine that set of skills and be highly successful. But it's hard once the field gets 300+% bigger to have that be a viable tool, right? Because those balls that you're used to squirting through the infield, well, now your infield opponent has a lot more time to find a route, to glove that ball, and to throw you out. Right? Like that's just, again, this is relative to the play space and relative to the environment. Same thing on the throwing side. Like there's a lot of issues here. So when you start to think about composition of like the player B, like a skills at scale kid, a kid who has probably had a worse batting average from the ages of 9 through 12, might have walked a lot more kids than average between the ages of 9 through 12 or 9 through 13 or 9 through 14. But in the background, that player has had opportunities to continue to learn and refine what it looks like to pair accuracy with output. It's not easy, so you can forecast some decrease in production or a little less game theory optimal during those intervening years of 9 through 12, 9 through 13, 9 through 14. But when the real estate changes, that player is a heck of a lot more close to game theory optimal because they're not regressive in their development of output. That's the thing that we worry about. And again, when I see 1.6 to 1.8 million kids who stop playing our game between the ages of 13 to 17, it's hard for me, when you think about like the broad ecosystem, to not go, I wonder if that kid would have stayed in the game if they could hit the ball 5 to 10 miles an hour harder. I wonder if that player would be more likely to be able to find a playing spot on the field, much less be a more competitive pitcher if they threw 5 to 10 miles an hour harder. The real estate changes the competitive nature and the landscape of the game. Like and you could think that I'm wrong, but you can't argue it, and nor can you change it. So look, what's the opposite of this game theory optimal approach? Well, that's skills at scale, right? Like that's the thing that we advocate for. What we advocate for is a skills at scale approach, meaning when you are through those ages of 8 through 13, 14, or 9 through 12, or 9 through 13, that you are spending an age-appropriate amount of time trying to cultivate both. Accuracy paired with output. I want to be able to make contact, but I want that contact to look like hard hit balls to the outfield. I want to throw a little bit harder, right? And that benefits me on the mound if I can learn how to throw a firm, well backspun four-seamer or an intentionally nasty turbo sinker or whatever you want to call it. But it also helps me be more competitive if I'm playing on third base, if I'm playing short, if I'm playing in the outfield. I don't want to have double cuts on every throw that I make. It's a real estate problem. That's when it changes, and that necessitates the output. So that's what we advocate for, right? And I guess to me, at the end of the day, a lot of this kind of comes back to, like, what's the point? And I have to be honest for you that the point for me and the genesis of, I guess, like a lot of this stuff when it comes to like the founding of the academy, creating the youth baseball development certification, writing the skills at scale book, running the off-season training groups back in our old facility, the point of all that was a personal one. I know my kid loves baseball a lot. I want to equip him with the skills that he needs to play the game until he doesn't want to play it. I respect his autonomy in making that decision. But I know that if he has an eye towards playing it in the long term, then I have to be more than tacitly aware of what that long-term competitive environment looks like. Because I don't want him to be in a spot where his playing opportunities are reduced or eliminated because his stuff isn't good enough, and then he ends up scrolling on Instranet and scrolling on Instagram and clicking ads about how he can gain 4.5 miles an hour in 6 weeks. I'm not doing that. I don't want my child to be put on the back foot that way. Doesn't mean that I am kind of like punting on any competitive viability in the current term too. And I don't know, man, to be honest, when I think about the struggles we had and the mistakes that we made when we started the academy, so like 5 years ago, I think it would be entirely fair to say that we probably under-indexed a little bit on the application of the output that we were developing. Like that's just true. Doesn't make me feel great to say that. But all I can do is like go through this thing and apply the things that I'm learning as I learn them. I can analyze decisions that I made in the past about the way that our program works or the curriculum that's in the book and go, I should have done it differently. And the reason why in the Skills to Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual, paid shill, the reason why so many of the games in there are different than they were in like the Skills to Scale practice book, or to a degree in the Youth Baseball Development Certification, is that as I've done this thing and gotten more reps, I think I have a better understanding of the mechanism by which you can train for both. Both things matter. They just do. So it's my responsibility as a coach, it's my responsibility as a parent to find a pathway to train on both sides. You can do that in phases, right? And I think one of the things you'll find in the book is the way that we approach kind of phase-based training, wherein in a bat speed phase, if we're really going to maximize the value of that bat speed, to be honest, I just don't care about contact. I just don't. Now, I know that the best application of bat speed is going to result in the highest amount of velocity. So the simple pivot here is like, maybe we keep both as a KPI, a key performance indicator. What's your max bat speed? What's your max exit velocity? Like, exit velocity PRs don't happen by accident. Like, just, does that make sense? They just don't. They happen because you found a way to move the bat faster. That's just the physics, especially in the facility. Especially in the facility where you might take 4 rounds against the same, if we're not doing a mixed pitch day, you might take 4 or 5 rounds against the same throw ball velocity. Call it an 80-mile-an-hour heater. And if you go higher and higher and higher and higher progressively, or some amount of progression, in the exit velocity that's happening, you're moving the bat faster. The incoming pitch speed is static. You're moving the bat faster. That's what's allowing you to hit the ball harder. Now, I would also grant that all means of bat speed maximalization or deployment of bat speed maximalized aren't equal, right? Like, so again, the way that we might have done it 5 years ago would be like, hey, let's really incentivize just like some full let it eat reps all the time, and maybe not have not enough of consideration for training in a competitive environment that goes, okay, well, like we just had that round of, don't even call it a round. Let's say we did 6 weeks of bat speed training, but that phase is over. And now in this phase, we are going to track things like number of top 8th exit velocity green beans. For anybody unfamiliar, in hit tracks, when you hit a ball that's within 1/8 of your current PR, that number turns green. So the way to apply that idea is like, well, let's just track those things, right? We're outside of a bat speed phase, so I'm not encouraging like full 100% intent G hacks all the time. I might be saying like, hey, let's go into this cage and let's try to work like 80 to 90% or 85 to 95% or somewhere in there that works for the player so that they can start to cultivate a feel for what level of swing intent is going to allow them to maximize for good, beneficial, and skills to scale influenced competitive results, i.e. hitting a ball hard, ideally in the air. Not a pop-up. Call it from 5 to 25 degrees of launch angle if you want to get technical. You can even call it 5 to 15 if you want. You want something that's a little bit more flat? Cool. I accept kind of both sides of those things. A low sub 10 degree liner, great. Balls hit at a 25 degree launch angle that are hard enough to make it so that I can see the back of the outfielder's jersey, also very great. And that's kind of the difference, right? Like that's the thing, is we accept that in the current term for really young kids, 8 to 12, 9 to 13, whatever, there's one path where we can maximize for the current term competitive result. That's the game theory optimal. And the only thing that I am telling you is your child, if optimized that way, is like going to deal with a bridge that they cannot cross once they land on a 90-foot field until you figure out how to resolve that issue. And kids are malleable, right? They're adaptable. You can do bat speed training at 13 the same way that you could when you were 9 or 10, right? You can increase throw and ball velocity at 13 the same way that you could at 10, 12. The interesting question is what does it look like in terms of training priorities if when you're 13 or 14, you don't have regressive outputs, but you're ahead of the curve? Because you're still going to train and you're still going to develop, but you kind of change the floor, right? You put all this time in, you change the floor. Now what are we capable of? I was telling somebody that was asking about professional baseball, the big thing that we're advocating for here is that at an individual player level, you have the capacity nowadays to get as close as you possibly can to the truth of how good you could be if you just use your time correctly. Playing catch up, right? Like playing catch up at the age of 13 or 14 affords you different opportunities than what it looks like to continue development when you're ahead of the curve already at 13 or 14. It's just a different thing. But the genesis of this whole thing and what that path looks like for your child when they land there really comes back to like, what are you doing when they're 10? What are you doing when they're 11? What are you doing when they're 12? Are you helping them stay at or above the curve? Or are you maximizing for the result and probably hemorrhaging some opportunities to learn along the way? I would offer, and kind of sum this whole thing up, that like, and again, long-timers probably heard this one, so I'll dust this one off again because we're growing. Everybody gets told that they can't play the game anymore. Everybody. Pick your favorite generational baseball player, the guy who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That guy got told at a certain point that they couldn't play anymore. So if that happens for like those upper echelon of dudes, it's going to happen for everybody. And to me, again, like the very personal motivation for this whole thing kind of starts with the question of like, well, how long does my child want to play? Does my child want to just play baseball and have that be a thing in their lives for this minor amount of time? In which case, fine. I think you can make the argument that like addressing skill appropriately is going to help your child find more fun. And in finding more fun, they're probably more likely to reconsider how long they want to play this game. But that's up to you. If you want to do an accuracy optimized, game theory optimized approach to your child's 9 through 12 or 9 through 14-year-old journey in this game, like, like your mileage may vary, but like, go ahead. But I guess for me, man, like it's just, if I know that there are opportunities to optimize these things, it's really hard for me to not pursue them. And it's hard for me to not want to put information out that makes it clear that like, this is a thing that you can do. That's why we kind of pursue this skills to scale model. And that's why we don't pursue this kind of game theory optimal thing. We don't run our academy teams that way. We don't run our academy flex program that way. We don't do any of that stuff in our camps. It's just not a priority to us because the juice is not worth the squeeze. I'm much more interested. I mean, to be honest, I'm interested in helping more kids have the experience that my son has had. Played like 3 or whatever games on JV and got moved up to varsity as a freshman. Got a chance to be around some great senior leadership as a sophomore and make a run into the playoffs. Played last summer as a 15 or a 14-year-old. No, 15-year-old against a bunch of grown men in Europe. Is going to play against some full-blown adults this summer in the DR and Puerto Rico and etc. The way that I relate to this thing has always been driven by my children. Like that's just the truth. And, nature or nurture, right? I loved baseball when I was a kid. One of the first dates that my wife and I went on is we went and played catch. She knew she knew what she was getting into, and we made people, and both of them just wanted to play ball, and I don't know any other way to do it than to equip them with the information that they can use to help push that thing as far as possible. And I suppose in these last 15-ish years or whatever, it very well could have been that like my kids got into gymnastics. And I suppose because of the way that I am, if that was the thing that they were passionate about, maybe I would have found myself going deep diving in whatever the equivalent like skills at scale model of gymnastic development would be. I don't know what that is. It probably starts with avoiding overuse from what I've understood on the gymnastics side. And it also orients around like athletic output and capacity. That's just the only way that I understand this stuff, man. So I suppose the question kind of comes back is like, you understand that these youth baseball experiences that our children participate in, like the flame is going to burn brightly for a very short amount of time. Not long. What are you doing to have them start to accumulate more and more of those bright flames that actually start to mean something because the landscape and the competitive environment changes? Like, I won a league championship when I was like 11. I remember it. I mean, what I remember, because I caught, what I remember is we had like one out to go. I called time. I went out to the mound. I talked to my pitcher, and I was like, let's strike this guy out. I might have been a little bit of a scumbag early, so you can probably read between the lines of what I really said. I think it was either 11 or 12. I don't know. However old I was. Went out, called time, went out to the mound. We had 2 dead. We were about to win. Hey, let's go strike this guy out. And we did. I had bad experiences between the ages of 13 through like 17 or whatever playing the game, and I still remember those a heck of a lot more clearly than I do remember what happened when I was like 12, much less 11, 10, 9, and et cetera, et cetera. So we've gone about it this way. And I guess that's just the thing for me, is recognizing that you don't really ever know what these kids are even capable of, but you do understand that for like the ones that are really driven, they have this insane dream to play the game at a really high level. And I've had the luxury of learning from very, very smart men and women at this company for a long time. And with that information comes perspective about the truth of like what makes guys and girls good. Why are they good? From that, we've turned that into an understanding of how you can start to build those things at young ages, which then changes the questions that you're asking about what players need when they're not behind the curve. Skills to scale. That's where it comes from. So hopefully this kind of like longer expression of kind of the difference between the game theory optimum model and the skills to scale model makes sense for some of you guys. I don't know if I've really covered any new ground here, but I'll put it out there. A couple things that we'll finish with, just to check in with the This Week in Pitch Count initiative. 2 things that I will tell you. Number 1, conversations between me and MLB and a lot of the folks over there are continuing. Had a meeting last week talking to some of the physicians that consult with them, talking about the pulse sensor and how we can utilize that to have actual data about throwing workload that we can then deploy to create this new standard. Got really good progress going there, and I'm fired up about it. While that is going on, Things are just continuing to be as terrible as we might otherwise expect them to be. My buddy Dan over at Next Level Prospects sent this to me. Local 9U age group. Team 1, Friday through Sunday. Their top arm threw 147 pitches on Friday night and then went again on Sunday. Another group, Saturday through Sunday tournament, 3 top arms on one team, 153 pitches, 128 pitches, 167 pitches. Dan goes, there have to be guidelines to protect these kids. And there aren't. Again, horse glue territory for long-time listeners, but like I just... The whole reason of why I wanted to turn this into a weekly thing is because I want to amplify the real truth here. There are no rules. There are no rules, and there's no guidelines. Little League International, yes, MLB pitch mark compliant. Pony, Little League, MLB pitch mark compliant. You have some orgs that are MLB pitch mark aware. Hey, the speed limit's 60. Don't do that. But then there's no sheriff on the freeway, right? That's just not a thing. So the story that I told, and I think I've already told it on the pod, so I'll just give the brief version. When my son was 10 years old, he played for another org before we had teams at Driveline. It was like our end-of-season thing. Kid on the team, probably the best arm that we had, threw 174 pitches over the course of that weekend. I think, have the notes in my phone. But the most telling part of that is on that Sunday when our player was pitching in the final game that we had to play, and he probably had been up to already, we're like 140 or 145 or whatever at this point. Again, I could check my notes. Coach leaves the dugout, goes in the stands, right next to the kid's mom. And I'm sitting in the immediate vicinity so that I could hear every word that is said. And the coach goes, "You cool if I put him out there for one more inning?" And the mom goes, "Yeah, I trust you, coach." That's the nature of where we are. So I understand that the thing that we want to happen is like we want Superman to descend from the clouds, right? We want there to be some paragon of right who's going to get all the coaches together and go, "Hey, boys and girls, this overuse thing needs to stop." And have all of us just be like awash with knowledge. "Oh, thank you, Superman. Thank you for making this so clear to me." That ain't going to happen. Superman is not walking through that door. He is not coming out of those clouds. This grand realization or awakening that we want to have happening about pitch counts, it's just not going to come. Do not hold your breath. You will die blue in the face waiting for a change to happen, because the signal that we are putting out very clearly by our behavior is we just care more about now. We win this game, I get that stupid plastic ring now. I get my kid's picture on Instagram holding up that sign now. Medial epicondylitis, that's a later thing. Fractured growth plate, that's a later thing. An inability to throw without pain, that's a later thing. I want now. That's what I'm optimizing for. We have no reason, and I'm saying we, I am including myself in this thing because I am just a guy that's talking about the thing that I am seeing, and I can't fix it either. Clearly. I'm doing this podcast for nearly 100 episodes. This is going to be episode number 99. And if you've been here from the first to this one, man, thank you. And not only that, I know that I'm probably getting a little bit pessimistic here. I know that there have been people who've written in who are like, "Man, I'm changing the way that I'm doing the thing." And if you're one of those people, you have my unending thanks, because you are dealing with the same incentive structure that I have, that my coaches have. I want resolution of value now. I want my kids to see their picture on Instagram and send it to their friends and brag on our program and feel good about good about the thing that they've earned. But the thing that is very clear is that we are more willing to sacrifice the downstream effect for that thing now. And, we often talk about baseball. And we also, I've kind of hinted around that, on the fast pitch side in softball, I think it might be worse. And I'm not in that world as frequently. My daughter had a little bit of time in fast pitch and then came back to baseball. So I'm aware, but I'm not super plugged in. But I get stuff like this. District softball tournament in blank blank county. Qualifiers moved on to states, which is a 3-day tournament played in 110-degree heat in blank blank area. Local team's 11-year-old threw 457 pitches on Saturday and Sunday. We can't help ourselves. And yeah, it's a non-overhead throwing motion. Fine. You do something almost 500 times over the course of 2 days. Explain to me how we are not landing on the scientifically valid understanding of where the genesis of injuries are. Accelerated fatigue, kinetic and kinematic changes, decreased performance, and injury. 457. If you don't think that the intentional goal of what we're doing on the baseball side is not to start to bring some sort of sanity to fast pitch, it's needed and it's obviously necessary because kids are literally being injured for choices that adults are making about their workload. And again, I'm going to ask, in what other environment would this be permissible? I can't think of one. I cannot think of one wherein children are allowed to grossly overwork themselves for nearly meaningless gain. And all the adults in the equation are like, I can't think of anything else. So, because Superman is not walking through that door, because he is not coming down from the clouds, we need rules. Because we as coaches and parents who coach can't help ourselves. Didn't really want to end on a downer here, but 457 over the course of a couple days is definitely a new low. It's incredibly, incredibly aggravating that this is something that, what does that child's Monday look like? Can they brush their teeth? Can they put their backpack on? One of the biggest correlations between of injury at the adult level is prior injury. Right? What's the inverse of that? And I don't think we know. I don't think we know. I'm not asking this rhetorically, but I can make a fairly flipping logical conclusion that 457 pitches or 220 or 300, any of the other grossly inappropriate numbers we've talked about on the baseball side, or 457 on the fast pitch side, what does that portend for that kid's future? Are they going to look at that trophy or ring on a wall when they're post-surgical and go, worth it. Boy, I'm so glad they ran me out there to death when I was 12, because that stupid $3 ring means so much to me. What a relief. Cost paid. Is that a thing? Again, I'm sorry. It's been a week. I'm ending us on a downer, and I don't want to do that. So instead, let's quickly pivot. Father's Day yesterday, I posted something on my social, just like, what other gifts could I ask for, right? Like my wife is like, oh, what do you want for Father's Day? I don't want a thing. I have the partner of my dreams. I have children that I adore. I have wonderful relationships with adults that have molded me and shaped me and helped me learn and grow along the way, and still, with all of my flaws and with all of my ugliness and with all of my issues, still love me. What more can I ask for, man? And whether you're a dad out there that listens to this pod, man, I love you, and I hope that the people in your life told you that they loved you. I'm sure that they did. Whether you're someone who has had the opportunity to be parented by a father or an uncle or a grandfather, when I was younger, I think I thought that variance in how I was parented by people other than my biological father was like a flaw. And man, it's just so clearly a gift. It's just so clearly a gift. I got a chance to spend like several days with my dad, love him to death. I got a chance to spend some time with my uncle, who was very involved with raising me when I was a kid, love him to death. And so yeah, man, Father's Day is a pretty big deal. And I don't know about you, but I hope you received everything that you got. And like, look, man, part of my Father's Day was spent shearing a bolt on a 1994 Ford Ranger in half. So it wasn't without its some amount of frustration and a little bit of blood, but still a phenomenal day. So shout out to all the dads out there that are the ones who make this thing run most of the time. And if you're listening to this podcast, unless you're like hate listening because you don't like me, and that's okay. If you're listening to this pod, I think I can make a reasonable assumption that you're trying to do it in a way that is what I would call the right way. It's anybody here at Driveline would probably call it the right way. And I have all the esteem and appreciation, love in the world for what you're trying to do. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Happy Father's Day to you. That is all that I've got today. I've rambled on enough. My name is Deven Morgan. I'm down by law. I will catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.